guys. Maureen, welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. That sounded a little Valley Girlish, didn't it? That was an accident. I didn't mean to sound that way. Today, we have, last week was our interview. And if you remember, our orders go episode recap, interview, character spotlight, character dynamic, and then we start over at recap episode. But this time, we are doing a little bit, every 8 episodes we'll be doing this, where we do recap, interview, spotlight, relationship, recap, spotlight, relationship, and then a live show. So we want to know, we still haven't gotten enough people to let us know what they think about a live show. If there is not enough interest for a live show, because we don't just want to be sitting there waiting for people to call in and nobody calls in. So if there's not enough interest for a live show, if that's not something that you guys even care about, and I remember last week we talked about what I mean by live show is we would go on our host site and we would start a live podcast, and through Podbean you guys would be able to call in and talk with us, but at the same time we're also going to be recording for a YouTube live, so we'll be doing 2 live at the same time. And on YouTube you can type in your questions, you can send them in that way. So that's what we mean by live. So we would be able to interact with you in real time. And if that's not something you guys are interested in or even care about doing, then what we would do is kind of like a free-for-all episode where we just talk about what we want to talk about with Sanditon. I'll be doing it with my whole team of people who help run the Facebook group, the Sanditon Chronicles, Sanditon Family Fan Club. There are 4 of us, including myself. So we will all be on there no matter what. So it's up to you if you are interested in a live show, a live podcast, or if you'd rather us just talk about what we want to talk about. But every 8 episodes, that's what the structure will be. So today we are doing a spotlight, and today we are talking about Mary Parker. She's one of my favorite characters. She's such a subtle character, and she's such a worthy character. I think Jane Austen always writes at least one character who is set apart from the rest by her attitude and her persona and by how she treats others and how, I don't want to say more righteous or more holy, because I don't know that she is, but I think there's just almost a more deserving, I guess I could say, a more deserving person than anybody else in the book, even our heroines, right? Charlotte Lucas in Pride and Prejudice. I know I talk about Pride and Prejudice a lot, but that's okay, because it's still Jane Austen and it's still part of this universe. But if you look at Charlotte Lucas, she was an incredibly selfless character in that book. Yes, she married Collins just because she had no other options, and that was a self-serving thing. But even in that, she waited until he was rejected by the ones who could actually really, and Charlotte could always benefit from that relationship, but she didn't do anything, didn't make any move until she was certain that the Bennet family had turned him down. So even in the way she accepted her proposal, it was not self-serving. So there's that character. There is Eleanor in Sense and Sensibility, I think, is a selfless character. So Jane Austen always writes these selfless characters that are, of course, Eleanor Dashwood is, did I say Roosevelt? I don't know if I said Roosevelt at first, but Eleanor Dashwood, she is one of the heroines. But in Pride and Prejudice, Elizabeth is the heroine, and Charlotte Lucas kind of falls to the wayside. But she is the better person, I think, overall, Charlotte Lucas. And in the same way, Charlotte is the heroine here. And I don't think Charlotte is a bad person. I don't. I do think that Mary is the better person overall. I paused because I was thinking of in the final episode, episode 8, when she knows that Charlotte wants to marry Sydney, and Sydney wants to marry her, but she kind of rejoices over the fact that Sydney's going to save their family. So, man, I guess I'm going to have to rescind my statement. But to start off with, for sure, at least how Jane Austen wrote her. And remember that in episode 8, that was not Jane Austen's writing. That was Andrew Davies and the writing team that wrote those. So the way Jane Austen wrote Mary in the beginning, she has set her up, I believe, to be one of those selfless characters, to be one who puts everyone else's interest above her own. And I do think that Mary does that consistently throughout the show, up until the very, very last episode, the very last moment, really, that we see her. Because the last moment we see her, she's saying goodbye to Charlotte. So right up until that moment, Mary had consistently put everyone else's needs above her own, everyone's. And That's the kind of character she is. And I think really to do that, you have to have a certain sense of firmness about your character, a defending sense about your character. You have to be a strong person to be able to do that successfully, I think. And in that same vein, so we see Mary. All this goes back to the beginning where I was trying to talk about them on equal planes with their husbands. So we see Mary joking with her husband in the show. Now, I'm talking about the movie. I'm not talking about the book right now because I have to confess, I've only read the beginning of Sanditon twice, and I've only read the whole thing once. So I think I've only read through chapter 3 twice. So I don't really remember exactly how it starts other than their carriage breaks down, but I don't remember specifics about Mary's character when Jane Austen wrote it. But in the show, right, we see Tom and Mary in the carriage ride, and I love that. I told you before that this is going to come up a lot, that carriage ride, and I just think it's so funny. I don't know why. I think it's just the polar opposite reactions of the two. But we see her kind of, she accepts what Tom says, even though she knows it's bad. She's willing to trust him. I don't think it's that probably part of it is that she doesn't really, what is she going to do? They're already going full speed in a carriage down the road, so she's not going to do much. But I think there's also a level of, okay, I'm going to trust him. Whatever, I'm going to trust him. And then when she's in the house with Haywoods, I almost called them Hathaways, with the Haywoods, she insists on bringing one of their daughters back. Now, that could be seen as self-serving because, honestly, Mary is alone. And it's sad to me when you think about, like, if you actually stop to think about Mary's character, who does she have in Sanditon? Esther Denham really doesn't have anybody besides Edward, and even that is, yikes. But Mary has nobody. Tom is not really available for her because he's off running and doing Sanditon stuff all the time. And Lady Denham, while a figurehead in the town, doesn't really have an interest for Mary. And I think that Mary would try to gain her favor as a booster to her husband, but I don't think that she really connects with Lady Denham on her side either. I think Lady Denham is too hard, and I think Lady Denham is too, not intentionally cruel, but she is cruel. So Mary can't connect with somebody like that because that's not Mary's personality. That's not who she gravitates towards. That's not who she connects with. And so Mary has nobody. Even her children have to go with the governess to be taught, right? So when they're at the Haywoods' house, yes, inviting one of their daughters to come back is a godsend for Mary because finally I get someone who I can have as a friend, who I can have as a confidant, who I can have as somebody who's willing to be there for me. And so it took me a few times to watch it to get to this point, but now when I watch that opening scene when Charlotte is really excited to go with Mary, and you see, like, do you remember that scene? Or Charlotte's like, can I please? And they shoot over to Mary's face, and Mary's just excited that she wants to come. And I just feel like this warmth in my heart for Mary. And I guess it took me a while to get there because at first they weren't my friends. But now it's like they're my family. They're more than friends to me because I've seen it so many times and I've invested literally hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours in this show and into studying out the characters and into reading the books and into all these other things. So they become my family. They become friends to me. And that scene when Mary just looks, she's got one of the little Haywood kids on her lap and Charlotte says she's willing to come and she just looks so excited and so happy and she's got this big smile on her face and it's such a heartwarming moment because it's twofold for Mary. And honestly, I think that Mary inviting Charlotte to come, or any of the daughters really, she didn't specifically invite Charlotte, she invited any of the daughters to come, but I think it's twofold for her, and I think that's indicative of her character because one, I think she wants to help Tom. I think she knows that if we can get more visitors in, then hey, that's more visitors. If we can get this daughter to come, then maybe the dad will come and the mom will come, then their 5 million sisters and brothers will come and then they'll bring people. So I think that on some level, I think Mary has that because I think Mary's really intuitive. And I think that's demonstrated throughout the show. She's intuitive, she's smart, and she's watchful. And she's certainly not stupid when it comes to Tom's motivations and anything he does. he's vocal about it. So, I mean, if you miss that his whole thing is, we have to bring visitors to Sanditon, we have to get them here. If she didn't pick up on that, she's not looking very carefully or even looking at all. So Tom has not been shy about needing visitors. So I think that her inviting the daughter there was partly that, but I think it was also a way for her to have a friend. And so when she realized that the oldest daughter, Charlotte, was willing to come, I think she just almost like relief. That smile that she has is almost, it's not like exuberance, but that smile that was so big on her face was almost like a relief, a sense of relief for her, I think. And so in the carriage ride, we see her talking with Tom and Charlotte. And of course, the scene where Tom says, let's go to Lady Denham's. And she kind of prods him. Mary doesn't, I think I actually talked about this in the recap for episode 1. But Mary doesn't shame him. She's not like, come on, are you serious? You're going to go do work before we go see our kids? She doesn't say any of that stuff. But she gives him the option to make his own decision on it while directing him in the right direction. Do you know what I mean? She says, before we see the own children, Tom, our own children, Tom, and she makes it a question. So no matter what he says, the decision becomes his. She knows he's going to make the right decision because she subtly brought it to his attention, and he's going to go with that because she knows that she's given him the answer right in the question. But the fact that she asks it instead of says it shows a concern for Tom as the husband, as the head of the house. And so while Mary we see later in like episode 5 where she's yelling at him, which is one of my favorite scenes, when one of my favorite lines from Mary is, no more promises, Tom. All you ever do is break them. That's one of my favorite Mary lines. So while she's not subservient to him, as we can see in episode 5 when she says that line, she still respects him enough and loves him enough to let him still be the head of their house, to still let him be the man as his role was in that time. And I think that's one way that she demonstrates it. But then you also see that she's just, while she's with Tom and Charlotte, she's laughing, she's light, she's free. She really truly enjoys being around her husband, and she really truly enjoys having a friend there. But I think more tellingly of her character, in that carriage ride, we can see that she is more or less Tom's equal in that carriage ride. And I think that was just kind of a brilliant way to introduce Mary's character, right? I mean, I know that was Jane Austen too, so that must be why it's so brilliant, because Jane Austen is brilliant. And so, moving on, we see her, I'm trying to think of which one is next. Still in episode 1, when they talk about, she's kind of giving her a rundown of everybody in the town. Now, I'm not necessarily going in order, so Sanditon police, please don't come at me saying that's not the order it went in. We're just talking about Mary's character, so I'm going to be flip-flopping to whatever suits my needs to talk about at the moment. So when Mary is talking about the people in town, and she says to Charlotte, how does she word it? She says, now you wouldn't be embarrassed to dance or stand up with what does she say, a clerk or a shop owner? Yeah, I mean, you remember the line I'm talking about. I'm probably getting it wrong in some ways, but she's basically asking Charlotte, you wouldn't be, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on all the words I need to use right now. You wouldn't be too high up for one of these lowly merchants, would you? Is the gist of what she's saying. And Mary doesn't just expect that of Charlotte. You see in that first dance, Mary's dancing with someone, not her husband, and there's not enough wealthy people in that town for the person who she's dancing with to be anyone other than a shop owner. There's Lady Denham, there's Edward and Esther, and there's the Parkers. And those are really the highest people in that town, at least that were shown. So the person that Mary dances with has to be a shop owner. So Mary doesn't just say that for Charlotte. She's also saying that, you know, I also will dance with a shopkeeper. I am not so high and mighty that I, even as the lady of this town, will not dance with a shopkeeper. I will dance with the shopkeeper because I think the aspect of her character that shows is that she values all people. Mary's heart is truly one that is looking toward all people, not just those she's connected with, not just those she loves, not just those who are in her circle, but she just values people. I think that Mary sees that people have things to offer, even if they don't have money, even if they don't have a title, even if they're not building an entire town. She still sees that they have something to offer. And I think we can kind of see that when James goes up to Tom after, it's after Old Stringer's incident, and James loses it on Tom, and then he has to come back and he tries to apologize to Tom. You see Mary, and they make a point of showing Mary too behind the curtain watching. And I think part of the reason she's watching there is because she wants to see how Tom will treat Stringer. Because that scene when he lost it on Tom, Mary and Charlotte look taken aback. But I think it's because Tom has not been telling her the information the way he did in the beginning of their marriage. I think that, and we already talked about Tom and Mary Parker and their marriage in our last relationship dynamic. So if you have not seen that episode, that should be episode 4. So there's the introduction and then 4 more episodes. So look at the 4th one and we talk about Tom and Mary's relationship as a couple. And right now I'm just focusing on Mary. So I think part of the reason she acts so taken aback, or appears so taken aback, when young Stringer screams at Tom and he's like, "No, this would never happen. I told you we need more men." And Mary and Charlotte are kind of like, whoa. I think part of the reason there is because, one, she's astounded that James has told them, we need more men, and Tom has not gotten it. Now remember, Mary's not aware of these money issues. So she doesn't really see a reason that he would not be helping these men out. These men need more help. And if Old Stringer's accident is a direct result of not doing your job at helping these men, I think that becomes a problem for Mary. And I think that's one of the reasons that Mary starts to get a little more suspicious at that point. Because of that. And we do see, I think it is in that episode. Is it that episode? Yes, it is. When the regatta. Because episode 4 is with Otis, and then episode 5 is Cricket. So episode 3 is when she loses it, or when Old Stringer has his incident. Yes, because episode 2 is the pineapple. Episode 3 is where Stringer has his incident, and that is at the end of that episode is when Charlotte and Sydney go and tell him about the regatta, and Mary has this kind of, and we've talked about this before too, where Mary's kind of like reserved and like, okay, I'm gonna have to endure this. And she has that expression on her face. I think that's why. Because I think finding out that the result, James or Old Stringer's accident was a direct result of Tom, 1, not doing his job, and 2, not helping out people when they told him, we need your help. We need you to send more laborers, and Tom didn't do it. I think that Mary, in that moment, began to be distrustful of Tom. I think in that moment, when she found out that when young Stringer got mad at Tom, I think that was the moment she realized that Tom was doing things wrong. I think that was the moment that she began to look at everything he did as suspect. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to stand by him. But I think that she understood that there's something, he's doing something wrong here. And I love that, because they almost made it seem when she was peeking out behind the curtains sneaky, right? They almost made it seem like she's spying on her husband. That wasn't their intent, but just the way it was shot and the way that she let the curtain go and the way that she watched them, they could just see that sliver of her through James and young Stringer. And then when he comes in, they did kind of make it seem sneaky, but I think the purpose of that, rather than making it seem like the wife was doing something wrong, I think the purpose of that was showing that this is what she has to do to find out why Tom is doing what he's doing. Because, like I said, from that moment that young Stringer disclosed in front of them, this only happened because you didn't get more men, she became suspicious of Tom's actions, and the way she was peeking through the curtain showed that she was willing to do that to get to the bottom of what he was doing to his laborers. I think that she was very upset with the fact that Tom was not caring for these men the way she felt they need to be cared for, because she values all life. She values all people, no matter their social standing. And to have Tom not treat them the way they need to be treated was not something Mary could get behind, I don't think. And I think that when he comes in and she says, "Is everything all right?" She's trying, like she did in the carriage when she said, "Before our own children, Tom." I think in that moment when she says, "Is everything all right?" she's trying to give him an opportunity to say the right thing, to give the right information. And he doesn't. And I think she knows he doesn't. When he says, "Everything's all right, Mary. Everything's fine." And I think that is the reason for her facial expression when they come in for the regatta. Because it's like, you're already not helping the men. And now you want to throw this big party for the town. You're not doing the job you're supposed to do now. But this is your job. And I clearly have no influence over you anymore. So I think that that's the start of her hurt right then, is because she knows Mary is a smart character. I think that she is an incredibly intelligent person. I think that she's very intuitive, like I said before. But I think she knows that Tom is hiding something from her. I don't think she knows the depth of it. And we can see that in episode 5 at the cricket when Fred says, or actually it's James who says, why shouldn't we? We haven't been paid a penny in weeks. And they cut to Mary's face and she's just aghast. To the point where Diana looks at her and says, oh, Mary. And then she gets up and leaves. So clearly she doesn't know the extent of what he's holding back. She doesn't know the extent of what he's deceiving her about. But she knows he's deceiving her. And I think that's part of her pain. At least in that moment when he comes and talks to her about the regatta. And that pain just continues to build until the regatta episode, I think, is the only time that we see, the first time we see it restored from episode 3, I think it starts to crumble. Episode 7, I think it's restored. But so when Tom comes in there, he's like, can you not see it, Mary? And he's all excited and then got the hands going. And I just like using that voice with that line. So that's the reason. I'm probably going to bring that up in every episode that I can. But when he says that, and she's got that look on her face, I think she's just so, I think she's down. I think she's upset. And I think that she now realizes that he's no longer sharing everything with her, and she still has to go along with it because she can't make him share. She can't make him do anything. And I think it's just sort of a resignation that, okay, well, this is what it is now. And I think that was her reaction. But then we cut to, in that same episode, within minutes, it's, when Tom says, Mary, and she appears and she's still not smiling. She's still not happy. And he says, get the children. We're going to go to the beach. And her response is, but now it's almost dark soon. And now, so I think it went from understanding he's deceiving her, because not telling her everything is a deception. It's a lie of omission, right? So she knows he's deceiving her. And then in a very, very short time, he's excited to take her out and do things. And he's back to his exuberant, crazy self again. And I think she finds herself confused. And when they're walking the beach, he almost seems back to who he was. So I don't think she ever forgot that he was deceiving her. I don't think she ever forgot that he wasn't giving all the information. And I don't think she forgot that she was no longer being treated as a partner. But I think she was just so thankful to have her husband back that she let it just fall to the back of her mind. And that's why she says on the beach, I'm glad to have my husband back. And when he says, you and the children are my life. And he tells her that he loves her. And she says, it doesn't hurt to hear. I'm paraphrasing here, guys. Just know I'm paraphrasing. And then I'm aware I'm paraphrasing. But she says it'd be nice to hear it. I still like hearing it every once in a while. So I don't think she forgot that he cut her out as partner. I think she has been waiting for the consequences of that to be brought to the surface. I think she's not lying in wait, because that denotes a sort of sinister aspect. And I don't think there's a sinister bone in Mary's body. But I think that she is hoping that the return of Tom, and I think that's why she has that excitement over the frustration and resignation that she had before. But I think that she is hoping that this return to the old Tom means a return to their old relationship. And I think part of her probably thinks that, well, if he is going to be who he was before, then maybe he'll start including me again and we can get back to where we were. And I think she kind of just hopes that. I think she's, when you're in a situation and it could go two ways, right? And for instance, in a relationship, if you have someone who is doing something they shouldn't be doing, but then they show you a glimpse of who they used to be, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to choose this better version over the bad one that they've been, because I know that this is the version that's good and kind, and this is what I want. You never really lose that suspicion, and I'm not talking about an abusive, just to be very clear, I'm not talking about a domestic abuse situation. I just want to make that clear. I just mean in general, like a Tom and Mary sort of situation. You never lose a suspicion that they can go back to be that person. But you are just so glad to have the old person, the kinder person, the one who you had that relationship with back, that's the one you're focusing on. Does that make sense? And I think that's kind of what Mary's doing. I don't think she's forgotten. And I don't think she ever stops being suspicious either. But I think that she's just so glad to have this version of Tom back that she's hoping that this means a return to normal. Do you guys agree with that? I'm not sure. That's what I think anyway. And then we see in episode 4, we don't see a lot of Mary in episode 4. We see a bit of her when Sydney comes back. And we see a bit of her, because it's mostly Otis, Georgiana heavy, and then in the tail end, it's Charlotte and Sydney heavy. So we don't see a lot of Mary in episode 4. But when she does see, we just see she's excited, about Sydney. And that's the other thing too, is when you look back to the first episode, and you see her talk about Sydney, I think that is one of the greatest indications of the character that she has. I think that when she says, my children are yelling upstairs, I just started, and I'm so used to just stopping to hear what they're saying. My husband is up there with them, so they're not alone, but I'm so used to stopping to hear what's going on as a mom that I automatically just did that in the podcast, and I apologize for that. But I think that when Mary talks about Sydney, she acknowledges his bad. That's the first thing she does, is she acknowledges, and she says, sometimes he can be harsh, like he was with you just then. And she validates Charlotte in that moment, which is such a kind thing to do when you're defending someone. She's not excusing his behavior either, which I think is also right. She doesn't excuse Sydney, and she validates Charlotte in the same time. And in the same breath, she talks about, and while that's not okay that he did that, I don't like that he did that, he's really had some hard times with relationships and with women that have caused him some trauma. And as a trauma person myself, and I've had a lot of trauma in my past, I relate to that. I get that, because there's still some situations and some relationships where I'm like, nope, I'm not even going to let you have a time of day. I'm not going to let you in even a little bit. I'm going to keep you closed off, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you stay closed off. I can sort of relate to that, and I can get that aspect of Sydney's character. And while being left essentially at the altar, granted they didn't get there, but I mean, they were going to be married, Eliza and Sydney, and she left him. While that's not a physically traumatizing thing, in that time period, you have to understand that a broken engagement was a big deal. And yet we don't see that they were engaged. There's no way I think that it says, remind me, please, if you remember from the book, because it ends before we meet Sydney in the book. We're just about to meet Georgiana in the end of chapter 12 of the book. And that's where it ends. But I don't remember if it actually says if they were engaged before, or if they were just in a relationship expecting to be engaged. But I do know that they allude to them being engaged. But do you think I'm wrong in saying that? So in those times, to have a broken engagement was a huge deal. It was a blow to your character. It said something about you personally, especially to a woman, but also to a man. If you had a broken engagement, that said something about you. And it essentially made it so that you were damaged goods, which is crazy now to think about, but that's the way it was then. And I think that's part of the reason Sydney ran. So while it's not traumatic in the way that we think about trauma, it was a whole different time period then. And so Mary recognizes, in her kind, selfless way, she recognizes that her brother-in-law went through something. He went through something that was a big deal. And she recognizes and has the foresight enough to see that this is not who he is. Yes, he can be harsh, but that is not who he is. This is a result of trauma. This is the result of something he's gone through. And she makes this appeal to Charlotte to see the good in him before Charlotte even has any sort of attachment to him at all. And she sort of does that with everyone in town, doesn't she? Especially with Charlotte, like when she talks about Lady Denham on the way to Lady Denham's house. When she talks about the shopkeepers with Charlotte in episode 1. Mary wants, because her value for human life, I think, is so intrinsic, I think that she wants everyone to see value in everyone else. And I think it pains her a little bit to see that some people are not treated well. And so we see, going on further into that, I think that when it all blows up, when it all goes in his face, and in episode 5 at the cricket, I love saying at the cricket. It makes me feel English. Not American, it makes me feel English, and I love it. London is one of my favorite places in the world, and England is one of my favorite countries in the world. So I'm okay with saying that. But at the cricket, we see Mary's very excited to be there. And I think in episode 4, episode 4 is when Tom gives her the necklace. Well, that was another thing I want to talk about. I didn't take any notes today, by the way. I just want to, I'm trying to stay on time. And I feel like if I have notes, then I'll talk about each note for like 40 minutes, and then I have 2 pages of that to do. So I didn't take notes. I'm flying by the seat of my pants today. But when she gets the necklace from Tom, and he says, I got you something. Well, first of all, she walks in the room and says, almost immediately after Cindy leaves, I'm sorry I'm sniffling so much. I'm an event planner. And when I don't get a lot of sleep, I get colds. And I had a 14-hour event yesterday, and I didn't sleep the night before, so I'm very stuffed up. But we see that as soon as Sydney leaves, she wants to know how it went. She walks in the room, and she says, how was the news from Sydney? Was it everything you hoped for? And even in the way she asked that question shows that she knows, Tom, she knows you're still hiding something from her. The way she asked that question, when she says, was it everything you hoped for? She didn't put specifics in there because she's drawing Tom's notice to the fact that I know that you know you're not giving me all the information. And I want you to know, I feel like that episode of Friends where they're like, they don't know that we know that they know that we know. Do they? And then they look at Joey and said, don't tell them. And he says, couldn't if I wanted to. I feel like I'm doing that a little bit. Sorry, I'm all over the place right now. But when she says it to him, the reason she says it like that, and again, I realize they're fake characters. I realize this was written by separate people, but we're analyzing them as if they are real. The reason she says it like that, the reason the writers have her written that way, is because she's drawing attention to the fact that she does not have any of the information, or at least almost none of the information. And I think that she wants Tom to know, I'm no longer your equal. I'm no longer your partner. And I think that there is some sort of a hope, especially from where we ended episode, episode 3, where we ended episode 3, when they're on the beach, hand in hand, and she says that, it's nice to have the old Tom back. I think that she still has that hope that this is a permanent change. This is where it's going to go. This is good. This is good. This is good. But she's never lost her suspicion. So then in episode 4, when he gives her that necklace, she wants him to know that, hey, you're still not telling me everything. I thought things were going to change, and they haven't changed, but you're still not telling me everything. And I think, like in the carriage ride, she's hoping that if she says it in the right way, putting it in his hands and saying, here, you make the decision. Here's what I want you to go to. Make the right decision. But then he doesn't. And I think that she's just kind of, because he still says, yes, he's worked wonders. It's better than I ever expected. I think some part of her knows that's not true. But then he brings up this necklace. And I think her reaction is telling, because she says, you didn't have to do that. And the reason I think she uses those words in particular is because that's not what she wants. She doesn't want gifts. She doesn't want extravagances. That's not who Mary is. What she wants is to be included in their partnership. She wants to be included in their relationship. She wants to be back to the way they were. She wants that partnership back. He truly didn't have to give that to her, because if he was trying to make her happy, all he had to do was put her back into her rightful role in their relationship. And I think that's why she words it that way. But then he gives her this gift that's so beautiful. And it's so kind. And typically when you give a gift to someone for no reason, it is a thoughtful thing. It's a kind thing. I don't think Mary absolved some of everything just because he gave her a gift. But I do think that what she sees that is like on the beach, when he tells her he loves her and he says the words that are kind, following the words is an action that's kind. I think she's using this as another ticket of hope to focus on, to say that, okay, he really can change. Maybe this is a further indication that we're gonna go back to the way we were, because look, he wouldn't have even thought of me before. It would have been all Sanditon. He wouldn't even give me a second thought. But now look, he says these nice things, and now he's buying me this beautiful necklace, so maybe he is thinking of me more. I can't wait till we get to the Tom spotlight, because I want to know what he was thinking when he bought the necklace. But I think that's what she does. And again, I don't think she absolves him of everything. I think, like we talked about in the relationships where you don't lose your suspicion of the person they become, but you see the one he used to be come back and you're hoping that's permanent, I think she uses this necklace as something to focus on. As a hope that this is a return to the partnership. This is a return and this will be permanent. So I think that's the significance of the necklace. And then when they're at the cricket, you can see that she's kind of light when she's talking with Diana, but you notice that he hasn't been around in a while, so it's not unusual that he's not around, but every interaction he's had that's negative, Mary's nowhere near since Old Stringer's incident. James is gentleman enough to not bring it up to Tom's attention when Mary's right there. I think Fred would. I think Fred would have no qualms. I love Fred's character. I really do. He's one. James Atherton, if you are watching this, I would love to talk with you because I think your character is awesome. But anyway, so Mary is unaware still of these problems, but she knows that he's said the right words and then he's done the actions that prove he thinks of her outside of when he has to. I did air quotes on that if you're just listening to this. So I'm really sorry that the sniffles aren't here. I really wish they weren't. But I don't want to blow my nose on camera, and I figured that the sniffle is probably better than that. So I think that it's telling of when she's sitting with Diana by the river, when Arthur is playing with the kids, he's playing cricket with the kids, and then Tom shows up with Charlotte in tow. Mary seems so light, she seems so, I don't want to say distracted, but there's something different about her lightness there. Whereas in the carriage ride in the beginning, it was just kind of like a joy to be around. But I think this lightness almost feels like there's a timidity to it. Maybe I've watched Sanditon too many times, but really, is there a thing such as that? I mean, is there a time that's too much to watch Sanditon? I don't think so. But I think that there is a sort of timidity to her right then. I think that she is glad to have Tom come, and I think the fact that he is coming to spend time with the family, even if it's to practice cricket, even if it's just for a tea by the river, I think that the fact that he comes down there is more indication that, okay, he's thinking of something other than Sanditon. He's not so 100% dead set focused on Sanditon anymore, even though he's consumed with it. Him showing up to play with the family and spend time with the family, I think probably shows to Mary, okay, here's another action that shows that he's thinking about us more than himself, us more than this town. So I think she's starting to file things away. So all right, we've got the good words, we've got the I love yous, we got the time on the beach. So we've got the words, we've got the time, then we've got the gift that was thoughtful, that was not necessary, but he thought of me when he was out, and so he bought it just because, and he made that promise, right? So he made the promise of, this is a promise of things to come, and now he's spending time with the whole family together, and he's taking time away from work to just be. So I think she's starting to file these away. So she has that lightness that, with everything that he does that seems selfless, even though going to the park, unbeknownst to Mary, was not selfless. He was just desperately trying to get away from James and Fred. But I think that with every move that he makes that deceptively shows that he's thinking about someone else other than Sanditon, other than himself, I think Mary loses a little bit of that suspicion. She still has it there, but I think she loses it just a bit more each time he does something that demonstrates what she thinks is happening, right? And then at the cricket, she still has that same, when they're actually playing, she still has this delighted wife, delighted woman of the town, delighted to be there sort of attitude. And when Tom goes out there, she's excited, she's cheering on her husband, who, yes, we're finally in the mode of attempting to get back to where we were. And notice the reason I say that she does not lose all her suspicion is not because she's demonstrating that she's suspicious, right? The reason I'm saying that is because, remember we talked about when he gave her the necklace, and she asked the question in, was it all you hoped for? And the reasoning for asking that is because she wants him to know, hey, I'm aware you're still not telling me everything. And that's why I'm saying she has not lost all of her suspicions yet, because Tom still has not told her anything. Tom has not let her into a single detail whatsoever. It's merely his actions of choosing to spend time over with him. And unbeknownst to her, the only time he does it is when he's trying to get away from the people who are really upset with him. So That's why I don't think she's fully lost her suspicions. It's not because she's acting suspicious. It's because Mary is a smart character. Mary is a loving character. She is a perceptive character. I think she knows still that, okay, he's still hiding something from me. There's something I'm still in the dark about. But those things feel good. And I think it's probably been months and months since she's had Tom focus on her in any capacity. I think that, if I've been married for over a decade, which I realize is not that long, but we've been married for almost 2 decades. And there have been times when we just get so in the mode of kids work, that we just kind of want to shut down. And so he'll go to his office and work on some things, and I'll go to the TV and I'll watch whatever I want to watch, or read whatever I want to read, or do whatever I want to do, but we're separate and we're not talking. And that can go on for a couple months, depending on if it's during the school year and we have to do all these sports and all these activities and all this stuff. I have 3 children, so sometimes it's a lot. But then there's sort of this, I don't want to say unease, but there's this sort of, this feeling that sort of builds, that you're just kind of waiting for something and you almost feel anxious about it. But it's because there's no connection, there's nothing there. And then if my husband were to come and give me a hug, which he's done sometimes to break the separation, we both realize, okay, we're being too separate, and it'll take us a while, but we'll realize that eventually, even though there's no words that are there, there's no explanation of why, just that one action towards me, it just kind of is like, oh, this feels so nice. I prefer this. And I think that's what's happening with Mary. Not that there doesn't need to be discussion. I don't think there's ever a moment when she thinks, it's okay, he doesn't have to share things with me again. It's okay, he doesn't have to make me a partner. It's okay, he doesn't need to explain himself. I don't think there's ever a moment where she thinks that. But I do think that it feels so nice that he's paying attention to me. It feels so nice that he seems to have this desire to be around me, to be around our children, to be around our family. It feels so nice. And I think that's what she's clinging to. I think that there is probably a war in Mary of not wanting the attention, and that because people need attention. People need relationships. We were built for that. I think that she's just so delighted to have that I don't think she would be satisfied in that for long, but I think that she's probably at war within herself between, well, do I want this to stop? And do I want to ask him, what are you hiding from me, and risk losing this attention? Or do I want to just sit here and be happy in this moment where I'm getting this attention? And I think that's where she lands on, I think, until the cricket. When it comes out, he's not paying his workers. And then I think her rage comes from hurt, because he cut her out as partner. But I think it also comes from, how dare you do this to these men? These men have children. These men have families. And you're depriving them of their money. You're making promises you cannot keep. And I think that's her outrage at the necklace. Because Mary values life so much. And she values others above herself. Certainly, I think that if you put Mary in today's age, she would be one of the wealthier people who would rightly so, and I think we should all do a little bit of this, but I think that she'd be one of the wealthy people who give her money to causes like the homeless, and I think that she would be in the homeless shelter serving food, no matter her wealth, no matter her status. And so to have Tom mistreat, that's what it was. It was a mistreatment. Yes, Tom didn't have any money, but he should have articulated that to the men, and he didn't. What Tom did was mistreatment of those workers. And I think Mary was so incensed by the mistreatment of other people, of other human life that she values above her own, I think. That's where the rage came in, and why she rips off that necklace and says, you could afford to buy me this, but you couldn't afford to pay your men. She's outraged that he dared to treat their lives as so trivial. She's outraged that he dared to treat them like they were not deserving of that. And I think that in itself is the most poignant part about Mary's character, is that she cares about life, other life, so much more than she does about her own. Because people matter to Mary. And I love that aspect of her character. And of course, she's also probably partly enraged that all this time I've been so hopeful with these actions that you've taken, and these things that you've said, and the promises you made to me. I've been so hopeful that this was a return to who you were. But it was all an act. So there has to be some rage at that too. there has to be an extreme amount of disappointment in that you didn't return. You were just, it was all an act. You just did all these things to pretend like you would become who you were before, but you're really the exact same, if not worse. So there had to be a certain level of rage that she felt in that episode. And I think that Kate Ashfield did a great job portraying that and portraying her character. Really, I think Kate Ashfield did a solid job all the way through with Mary's character. I think that a lot of it is Kate's interpretation, and a lot of it is what she felt that Mary would have been feeling. And I think she hit it right out of the park. I think she was spot on with what Mary was feeling in episode 5 when she yelled. And even in that moment she was feeling, I think that she had felt disheartened, but also I think she probably felt a little stupid that she had sort of fallen for it. And I think that's why when Charlotte comes in and says, can I go to London? I can stay with Tom. And she says, Tom can't be trusted right now. No, Charlotte, that's my final answer. That was the shortest we'd ever seen her be with anybody, even with Tom. Like Tom, she had lost it, but with Charlotte, she was kind of short. You know, she was kind of snippy. And we haven't seen her be that way with anyone. And I think part of the reason she was that way with Charlotte is because she just felt so, I think she held that very personally. I think she felt it was her job to have seen this coming. I think that she felt that, you know, this should have been something that she noticed. This should have been something that she had not been duped by, because he was being nice and saying the right things and making these promises and seeming to prefer her and her children over everything else. I think that she felt a little bit fooled. I think she was frustrated by that. And on top of that, I think that she was more determined to not allow anyone else to be duped by him. And I think that's why she was so short with Charlotte. It's a shame that Charlotte came to her right at that moment, because she was probably still that day of still feeling the brunt of that frustration in that. And so Mary she feels things very deeply. And she takes a lot of responsibility for the people in her life. I think she took responsibility for the fact that Tom didn't do his job too. She understood that as a married person, as a wife, or as a spouse rather, that you're connected. And especially that time, what the husband did was reflected on the wife. What the wife did was reflected on the husband. There were so many weird rules in society, and what deemed you as a cast off or a cast out, and what made you good and climb up the social ladder. There were so many things that as a spouse, what you did directly implemented and influenced how your spouse was seen by your own actions. And so I think she took everything Tom did personally, and the fact that she missed those signs. I think she felt she missed those signs. There were only signs to show other than what Stringer and Fred would say. But again, she was never around Stringer, Fred, and Tom at the same time. So she had no idea. But she did know that she was walking around with this expensive necklace that she accepted the gift of, that she was willing to allow because it showed a hope that he was going back to the person he was. But what it said to everyone else is, look at how I'm misusing the things that you should have. So I think in that moment she was frustrated that she had been duped, but I think she was also frustrated for the message that sent to everyone else because of her husband's bad actions. I think that she was incredibly sensitive to the people around her. I think she was incredibly sensitive to what might make them uncomfortable. We can even see that when Georgiana's late to the pineapple luncheon, when she's talking to Lady Denham and she's trying to draw the fire from Georgiana and trying to Lady Denham says, you don't have to butter me up. But that's not what she's doing. It's right after Lady Denham says that Georgiana's not there yet, that Mary starts to compliment Lady Denham and then compliment Clara. And I think that's because she's trying to pull the attention from Georgiana onto herself. Not that she's trying to butter Lady Denham up, but she's sensitive to the fact that Georgiana already has it hard enough, that she doesn't want to add onto this burden of Lady Denham viewing her differently, when I think Mary understood Georgiana's having a hard time. I think she was ahead of her time enough to know that that was a problem Georgiana was having, and she was trying to solve that, trying to at least, if not solve that, at least ease that for Georgiana. And I think she did it with the people around her. I think Mary's character was very sensitive to the emotions of the people around her. And I think that's because she valued people so much. She valued human life so much. And I think she understood that everyone had a role, no matter what your social standing was, what your financial status was, everyone had a role to play. Everyone was important. Everyone mattered. She understood that. And that's one of the reasons I love her character so much. And then we can see in the scene where even when Lady Denham's dying, air quotes, dying, when she says, everyone else can see it but you, Tom. Her concern is not for herself and for Tom and what that means if she dies, that they're screwed. That's not her concern. Her concern is, but this woman who is deserving of respect is dying. Can we not honor her? That's her concern. Yes, Tom puts it in a way that helps her to understand that while it's great that you think of other people, we have got to focus on this right now because we have children and we will be in big trouble, and so will they. And honestly, I think that's the only thing that could turn Mary's focus from others to herself, is to think of her children. And so I love the return of their relationship, because it's the first time really in the whole series in episode 7 that we see Tom give Mary the respect that that woman deserves. She deserves a medal. She really does. And Tom rewards her for it. And I love that little intimate scene where his suspender falls off and she puts it back up. In the Sanditon sisterhood, when they did the Q&A, they had... one of the fans had asked her a question about that, and she said that was unscripted. And so that's all Kate and Chris. And I love that scene. It's just so depictive of, this is what a return looks like. A real return. And that, because even before, when she was feeling joyful over the necklace and over the I love you and over the wanting to spend time with them at the lake, wanting to be there for, making these promises, even in that, as I had said, there was still kind of like a hesitation. Like there was a timidity to her joy. But in episode 7, there's a joy, but there's also an ease. Like it just feels like she can breathe easier, because that is actually what the return of the partnership looks like, with Tom sharing with Mary again, as well as thinking of her first before himself. That is the return to the relationship. And Mary notices that and picks up on it, and she rewards him by returning in kind, by I think that's the moment she lets go of her suspicions. I think that's the moment that she drops it all and says, okay, this is a return. I think that Mary is smart enough to have learned from her mistakes, and that she's not just assuming this is a permanent thing, but for that moment, she understands that this is a return. I will be watchful for it to change in the future, but this is a return to where we were. This is a return to our partnership. This is a return of who you're supposed to be. And I think in episode 8, I think that's why she's able to focus on Charlotte and Sydney, because we don't really see much of that. Charlotte and Sydney have got sparks flying the whole series, but we don't see it really, that Mary notices, until episode 8. And I love that she's finally, and I think that's another thing that Mary's grateful for, is that I don't think she likes focusing on herself, but I think that by Tom hiding things from her, she had to focus on herself, because she was constantly thinking about, what is he hiding? Why is he hiding? Is he going to continue to hide? And I think that she almost resented him for making her think so much on herself. And for the first time, she's able to think about Sydney and Charlotte, think about a different relationship that's not hers and her husband's. And I think she's grateful for it, because that's where Mary thrives, is thinking about other people, is focusing on other people. And so I think that it was a hard blow probably to hear that Sydney was engaged to Eliza instead of Charlotte, because she wanted them to be together. Her heart was for them to be together. And even in the scene after the fire, when she is talking with Lady Denham, when they're all talking there, Charlotte, Tom, Sydney, and Mary, and Lady Denham's railing on Tom, and she says, Lady Denham! She protects Tom again, like she did from Charlotte in episode 1. And so you see the return. It's almost like a full circle return of Mary's character, as she was originally intended. And I think that even in that moment, I think she understands better, because Tom had been sharing with her. She understands the gravity of the situation they're in financially, because Tom had been sharing. So I think that's why she was more on board with Charlotte, or with Sydney and Eliza getting together. Not because she was rejoicing that he left, but because Tom had been sharing things with her to the point that she truly understood that her children were in jeopardy if this did not happen, because Tom could not do it on her own. And I think that's the kicker right there. is that as Tom talked to her and as she watched the events over the summer take course, she realized Tom was unable to do this on his own, that in order for her children to survive and thrive, they needed someone else to step in. And I think that is why she's so okay with Sydney marrying Eliza, or becoming engaged to Eliza, because she realizes that he is really the only one who can do it, because her husband is completely incapable of doing it. That was something that it took me a while to understand, that because that was something that I was like, Mary is this person, and Mary loves Charlotte. She loves Sydney. Why is she fighting this? I don't understand why she's not, why she's not fighting it. But I think that's why. Because the events that Tom had, the absence of Tom, the hiding from Tom, the lies from Tom, the complete mismanagement and mistreatment from Tom to his workers made Mary see that he's not capable of fixing this situation, and she had to protect her children. And as much as she does still value all life, and she wants Sydney to have a happy life, and I think that if there is an episode, a season 2, I think Mary's going to fight to find that solution in the meantime. Because she does want them to be happy, and she knows that they love each other. She wants them to be happy. You could see that in the final ball scene in episode 8. I still desperately want to know what she whispers to him. I want to know what she whispers to Sydney when she stops him from going to Charlotte. All I know is that she says, "Sydney, you look happier than I've seen you in a long time." And he says, "Yes." And then they cut to Charlotte. And that's all I know. But that couldn't have been, like, why? Why did you have to say that right then, Mary? Why? That's my only thing that I see as a character flaw for Mary, is why. They couldn't have waited. But the final thing we see of Mary is where she's crying and saying goodbye to Charlotte. And when she says, "Even though it's not all you hoped it would be or thought it would be, I hope you don't regret coming," I think that's also her asking Charlotte to forgive her a little bit. Because I think Mary's going to feel a lot of guilt over this for a while. Because she cares so passionately about other people. I think that's her way of asking Charlotte to forgive her for putting her and her family above Charlotte and Sydney. Because I think Mary's aware that she's doing that. Mary's doing it for her children, but I think Mary's still aware that she's doing that, and she wants to let Charlotte know that she knows that too. And because they could have just avoided that conversation. They could have avoided that altogether, but she didn't. And I think that the tears for Charlotte were twofold. I think they were partly, my only friend is leaving. I've grown to love you, Charlotte, but I also think I'm so sorry that you're leaving in this way. I'm so sorry that you're leaving brokenhearted. And I think that her pain, like we said before, I think she's intuitive to the feelings and emotions of people around her. I think that knowing Charlotte was going through that affected Mary on that level. And I think that's partly what the tears are for. So in season 2, let's just talk like it's from here on out. Let's just talk like season 2 is happening. I mean, it has to be, right? We've all seen the, what is it called? The production schedule, is that what it is? Or permit or something on Twitter. If you haven't seen it, I'll find the link and I'll show it to you, or I'll put it in one of the descriptions. But where it says that filming is supposed to be starting in July. It's going to be starting in England, and it's called Sanditon 2. And so, can we just pretend that it's let's just believe and stand on faith that it's happening, okay? So let's just change all of our dialogue to reflect that. So in season 2, what I think will come from Mary, judged based off of her character, that we learn in season 1, is I think she's going to continue to write, and I'm actually rewriting the ending, or not rewriting the ending, but I'm continuing off of the ending. I'm writing a little side story because I need it to be finished. It's not finished. I know that Paula Byrne said that she's satisfied with the ending because it's a realistic ending, but I am not satisfied with it. So I think that Mary will continue to write to Charlotte. I think Mary will convince her that, I don't even think Mary will convince her anything. I think Mary will just try to keep tabs on her, but I think she'll also write to Sydney at the same time. I think eventually she will try to work with Lady Susan and Lady Denham and Georgiana to find a solution. Or one of Lady Denham, I don't think Lady Denham will be really involved in that if they go to her, but I think Susan and Georgiana will probably go to Mary because Mary is their connection to Sydney. And I think Mary will be more than willing to work with them because I think she wants them together. But I certainly think season 2 will bring a happier Mary. I really do. So that is all I could talk about on Mary. Actually, that's not true. I could talk so much more, but this is about an hour long. So I am going to choose to not make your ears bleed. And I'm going to choose to stop talking now. And I want to know your thoughts. Do you think that I was right on Mary's assessment on her character? Do you think I'm wrong? And would you have anything to add that I forgot? I know that there are some of you out there who watched all the episodes and know it as well as I do, if not better. And you probably have corrections, or you probably have things you'd rather tweak, or things you think I left out. I want to hear those things. So let us know. Let us know. This is our first actual character spotlight where we talked about a character in Sanditon, and there's many more to come. And remember, if you have not reached out to us, but you want to have a conversation with me about Sanditon, reach out to me, please, because we have a year's worth of episodes. That is, we have 52 episodes, 53 actually, episodes scheduled total. We've already gone through 6, but we have 53 total episodes. So that means there's 47 more that we have to fill with fan interviews, or just talking with me, or anything you'd want, really. So we would love, love, love to hear from you. And on that note, I think we're going to say goodbye. So thanks for coming along with us. Thanks for listening about Mary rather. And remember, go watch some more Sanditon, go stream some more Sanditon, and reach out to us on some social media. You can find us on Facebook at the Sanditon Chronicles, Sanditon Family Fan Club. You can find me on Twitter at Mojito. And I think we will be starting an Instagram soon. I'm not sure, but I think maybe. You can also email us at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you have a great week. We'll see you in a week. Bye-bye, everybody.